Today, AI is the worst it will ever be, by a very, very long way. So if you think at the moment, it hallucinates the most, it gets things the most wrong, it has the most issues that it's ever going to have. It is genuinely the worst that it'll ever be in any of our lifetimes today. But what does that mean? It means that, let's go next slide. It means that it's going to get better. It means that all the things going forward, all the work going in, it will gradually get better. And we've been here before with other technologies. You know, when we start to look back in time, if we go back to 1928, to Alexander Fleming and the birth of penicillin. So that's less than 100 years ago, we've gone from a situation where medicine was relatively rudimentary until now a situation, it's transformed our lives, it's transformed the amount of time that we live, transformed the way that we are. And that's happened in a really short period of time. And the same thing is starting to happen with AI. If we think about what it's going to do, so it's going to transform the experiences that you have. At the moment, when I go through and I think about the way that we look at customers, the way that we work together, at the moment, Amazon uses millions of events per second via Amazon Prime to start to customize, to start to understand how your shopping habits work, to understand you better. And at the moment, what it's doing is it's predicting, it's learning, and it's trying to work out what happens in the future, what your buying patterns, what you would like to do. As we start to scale up, as we start to have more interesting models, we start to have more compute available, increasingly that goes to a point where actually we can start to understand the why. We can start to understand behind humans, what is it that makes you tick? What is it that makes you want to move forward? And again, we've seen technology, we've seen these revolutions happen previously. When we think back to flight, so there were 60 years that happened between the Wright brothers' first powered flight and the moon landing. So we think we're starting to move forward. We start to think of 100 years for healthcare to get to the point, 60 years for flight to get to this point. And let's start to think what happens in the future past that. You know, one of the things that we can definitely say is that change is increasing in pace. This exponential increase, both in computing and data and the usage of all of it, means that it's getting faster and faster. If we think about the next 10 years, we're likely to experience the same amount of change that we had over the last 100. And that's going to be impactful for all of our lives. If we start to think about the applications of AI, so we start to think of the customers that we're working with at the moment and where these things really matter. We have some fantastic people that we're very fortunate to work with. If I think about in healthcare, for example, we work with a fantastic British company called XPANSE. They look at discovery of drugs. And at the moment, to get a cancer drug from the start of that process to the end of it takes somewhere in the region of about 10 years normally. And what they've started to do, so using the power of the cloud, using the power of Amazon Web Services, but more than anything, using the power of AI itself, they've started to shorten that period. When you start to work on things normally within science, we'll talk about this test, learn, build cycle, and we start to work out how we can shorten this through. The more that we can do that, the better. And XPANSE have got to a point where that 10-year drug discovery process has now come down to only 8 months. We can see the other use cases within finance. If we look at JP Morgan, for example, so they analyze in conjunction with ourselves billions of transactions per day, terabytes of data through card payments, through individual payments, and through the power of AI, they've started to come to a situation where they can reduce fraud by 30%. And this really starts to unlock this power of AI that goes through. But where is the value, you might think, for a lot of this? So if we come back, one of the things that people have said for a really long period of time has been this concept of data as the new oil. And it's really interesting going back. I think you can start to think about data lakes. Many of you will have used them. I think what happened over the last few years is people's data lakes started to turn into data swamps. They started to go to a situation where people couldn't necessarily see the value within that data they were taking for long periods of time. And how did that start to change? Well, it's relatively similar to actually what happened with oil itself. So if we go back before the internal combustion engine, oil was seen as something that didn't have a huge amount of intrinsic value within it. It was used for roofing, it was used for some lighting, but it wasn't something that you could think could transform whole cities, whole economies. It was just something that had some value but not enough. What changed around all of this was the fact that all of a sudden when the internal combustion engine started, we realized we could unlock that value. And that is exactly what is happening today. All that data that's been sitting around, all the data that people have stored, the sensor data, the pieces coming through, all of that can be unlocked at scale using AI. And this in turn is going to help accelerate this process. So when we start to think about the changes that have occurred, that the way this is accelerated, we can see this is going to go even more. And the way that people interact is going to change massively. So at the moment, when you sit down, when you switch on your TV, when you decide what to watch on Netflix, for example, one of the big things that will do is you go through recommendation engines. And these recommendation engines are starting to understand you more. They understand your habits, they understand your shopping, they understand what you want. The more you can go through this, the more that you can feel this connection with AI, the more that we can start to transform people's lives. When we look further into the future, the companies that really make changes in this world won't just get to be part of this revolution. They're really going to shape it. They're really going to change the way the world works in every way, shape, and form. And then we start to think about simulations. So we think about simulations. So simulations are an amazing thing at the moment. So one of the trends that we're seeing as a mega trend is the way that people are starting to move from simulating different areas of the development life cycle, and that's everything from material science to working on climate research to working on agriculture. One of the really interesting things around simulation is the more that we can start to do this in silico and the less that we can do this in physical world, the cheaper it becomes and the easier that side of it becomes. So at the moment, we've been working with a number of different charities. So we're working at the moment on crops, for example. So crops, we need water, we need to feed the world, we need to work out ways that we can do this at scale, and it matters. One of the things that we're really proud of is the work that we've done on drought-resistant crops at the moment. We're getting to a situation where we can improve the efficacy and the growing of crops by around 20% using artificial intelligence to understand the soil, understand the nutrients that are needed, and really start to change the round via data. All the companies, all of our life experience is starting to change as a result of that. And that goes across many different areas. We can start to think about your experience being changed in everything from the way that you get to the way that you travel, in terms of the car that you drive, the way that it works, to the way that you appreciate your life, the media you consume. There's a fantastic stat there that this year, for the first time, we went past a point where more than 50% of the content that you consume is AI generated. So every time you're on the internet and you're reading through things, more than 50% of that will be AI generated or AI curated. And that has a massive, massive impact. And it's really important as we go through this, we understand that. We understand what it's doing and we understand how that can help our lives. The more that we can together as a group come out with responsible AI to make changes the better we can, and the more that we can unlock those business opportunities. And again, all of this will happen quicker. So the last 100 years feels like something that happened over a really long period of time, the impact that went through. And if you start to think of compressing all of that down into a really short 10-year window, you're kind of at the place that we are currently. And what other things are changing this? That's some of the things that we think are really impactful. So none of this can happen without connectivity. Connectivity is absolutely key. You know, I think Abu Dhabi is an amazing city in terms of I've had fantastic mobile signal the whole time I'm here, which is somewhat different to London is sometimes. But as a planet, it amazes me, 37% of the planet have no connectivity. They have no internet access, they have no mobile access, they are disconnected on the planet. That's around 2.9 billion individuals currently. So one of the things that I'm really proud of that Amazon doing at the moment is Project Kuiper. So folk may not know this. We're currently in the process of launching about 3,500 low Earth orbit satellites. And why are we doing that? Well, the aim for us will be to give gigabit connectivity to every square mile of the globe, no matter where you are. And all of a sudden, it starts to swap some of the interesting connectivity challenges. You know, at the moment, most people are in a situation where to get high-speed connectivity, you have to be in a metropolitan area with lots of other people around it. And one of the really interesting changes that is just about to tip over is almost the opposite of that. With satellite-based LEO internet, you go to an interesting situation where actually if you're in a place that's less densely populated, that has less people, all of a sudden actually you're starting to find that you can get more bandwidth and you can get more connectivity. And that's going to open up these amazing possibilities to the rest of the world, to the undeveloped south. We're also seeing an interesting situation within AI where models are being taken from one area and they're being applied across different things. So one of the things we've seen recently in satellites is a real change within satellite imaging. So Meta, fantastic changes they've made within the AI space at the moment, using the data that they've collected through Instagram, through Facebook. They've come up with a fantastic model called SAM, Segment Anything model. What does SAM do? In the same way that it takes your pictures, it can cut out different pieces, different things around it. You can apply that to satellite data. We're working with a number of companies at the moment that are applying this to satellite data, to all kinds of interesting things. Some of the key points they've used around it so far that I've seen I'm most excited have been looking at different areas to understand flood risk. You know, at the moment when you get insurance, a lot of it's calculated off very generic stats of what needs insurance, how often was there a flood there, you know, all this data that's very, very historic. Going to systems like SAM, they can take that data and they can cut it up into really small individual pieces. So much in the same way that you might personalize your viewing habits on Amazon Prime, or your shopping habits via Amazon.com, or all the other cornucopia of things you do, what we're going to start to find, some of these financial goods and services that you do are going to become far more targeted, far more personalized just for you. And why do I think that's a good thing? Well, fundamentally, it brings down costs within all of it. It makes the world a different place. And I think the key thing about this is we're currently sitting at this extraordinarily interesting intersection. Technology is scaling. The scaling laws are here. For people that haven't read through it, it's worth reading the scaling law paper. And we're into a situation where increasingly more power of computing is coming, increasingly more data is going, and all of this is contributing towards this exponential scaling. There was an aircraft engineer, so many people know, so Moore's law is something that most people have heard of. There's, I think, what's one of the more interesting laws of Wright's law. So Wright's law was discovered, or worked on, I should say, by an airplane fuselage engineer in the 1930s. And he came up with a really interesting theory. He came out with a point of the more aeroplanes that were produced, the cheaper each one of those became. So he worked out the price of airplanes was going down as we made more of them, which seems like a kind of obvious thing when you think about it. But all of this comes into something called the law of doing. Let's say learn by doing. The more that you do something, the more that you learn around it. The more that you learn around it, the cheaper you make it. The cheaper you make of it, the more that you do it. And that's exactly where we are in AI at the moment. The more that we start to do this and the more that we start to scale out, the lower each piece costs. And at the moment, we're in a situation where there's billions of interactions. There's huge data centers around the world doing this. But the more they do this, the more it starts to become this transformative technology and the quicker it goes. So, you know, expect in the next few years this huge amount of change to happen that hasn't happened before. And I'm proud that we're helping democratize this. We've never lived in a situation before where anyone can go online and they can spin up supercomputers in minutes. They have this power that they can exist that is for anyone and is for the world to put together. Oops. And this ability to have ubiquitous connectivity, to have views all around the world, to start to bring all of this really starts to transform the lives of millions of people. We're going into a situation where we can offer more efficient crops, better yields, more information, AI where it's needed on a global scale. And so where does this lead? What is the end of it? Well, if we think back, you know, going back into 1928, the beginning, the discovery of penicillin, there is no way that anyone sitting there could work out where hospitals, where healthcare would have become. It'd been amazing to think the 200 million plus lives that have been saved as a result of it. It almost seemed dreamlike, the state we've got into. And I think exactly the same thing is going to happen with AI. The real difference is, and the thing to really, where all of you and people come to events like this and people just genuinely understand, is that it's going to happen much, much, much quicker this time. If you look at adoption of services, we could take ChatGPT was the fastest adopted service ever. Within 5 days, it got to 1 million plus users. And we're seeing this spike of adoption that comes into it. And that's why it becomes ever more important for all of us to make sure we're doing the right thing. I really believe that this is our chance to set the future in a way that makes sense. And bear in mind before, that 100-year change happened quickly for those people living through it. The 60 years of flight changed quickly for people living through that. This one is going to be far, far quicker. And this is one that all of you have the power to influence in a positive way and help spread and help democratically roll out. And if we think back, AI at the moment, today is the worst that it's ever going to be. And in the future, it'll be the best. And that journey, that change, that's up to all of you and all of us together to make it in a positive way. Thank you.